And I shared times where, like, CEOs lie in bed at night with their eyes awake, looking at the ceiling, thinking about things. How there were problems that I had to think about solving where I like would have to be quiet with myself and just say, okay, if somebody asks me the question, am I doing everything in my being to solve this problem? Like, am I doing everything I can? I know the answer is no. So what would I have to be doing differently? And, things like that, like stripping things way back to zero to kind of find the answers.
Hello, I'm Mike Ryan. I'm the Chief Networking Officer at PIMS, and welcome to our second season of Minutes with Mike. Now in my 33rd year at PIMS, I've had the privilege of partnering with companies both large and small, supporting their PR and marketing through customized fulfillment and distribution that delivers measurable impact on their brand perception, boosts positive affinity, and fuels their overall brand performance. And throughout my career, I've had the chance to work alongside many talented folks. This is their story. On this show, we'll sit down with some of the world's top marketing and business thought leaders to learn more about their success, how they got there, how marketing helped them achieve their goals, what strategies they used, and what inspires them. Please join me on this journey as we learn from those who are changing the way we think about business. So sit back, enjoy. You're listening to Minutes with Mike.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Minutes with Mike. Today, we are very excited. I am very excited to have Elana Drell Szyfer join us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Elana is everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I feel like Elana is the president of the CEW. And I had to double check my notes because, has it only been 3 months? Because it feels like it's been years already. And your name started popping up in my feed months before that. And then I started doing my research on you. And then when you were announced as the president, I was super excited because PIMS and the CEW have had a relationship for going on 20 years now. And very soon thereafter, I was like, okay, I'll let her, sort of unpack in her office first, and then we're going to jump to it because I want to get her on the program and hear all about it. So let's dive right into it. So CEW, that's the latest thing. It's going in tremendous places. That you guys are on fire. We were just having a quick conversation as a lead up to this on all the wonderful things that are going on. We're going to get to all that. I want to hear how it started for you. I want to hear, because I was watching a podcast that you're on. And by the way, I don't know where you get the time because you're also at these face-to-face events for the CEW. You do all this podcasting. You make yourself very available to everybody, which we certainly appreciate. How did it begin with you? Because I saw that you had said the term, you almost accidentally fell into beauty.
Yeah, that's very true. So I guess I'll go back to college if you want to go back to the beginning. I was an undergraduate history major and I went to school in New York City. I actually wanted to be an art history major because I have a kind of personal love of the art world and had taken an AP art history class in high school, but that was a little bit far for my father, my first generation American father. So I don't know why history was better or what we all thought I was going to do with that, but I really think college was formative for me because I came to New York City. I specifically wanted to be there because I always then had an internship and was working. And my internships were in things like public relations, corporate communications, and where the art world and corporate communications overlapped for me was I ended up working in a company that was a very large supporter of the arts and also had a wonderful art collection. And I thought to myself, oh, I'd like to be the person in a company that gives away money to the arts world. And I started to investigate that, and people basically said to me, Elana, that's not a career. That's the last job someone gets in a company before they're asked to retire. But if you want to do that, what you should do is you should basically go work in fundraising and start in fundraising make relationships with these companies, and then maybe someone will bring you over. And that's essentially what I did. And my first job was in fundraising, in development at the Juilliard School. So if you kind of think about it, I'm coming full circle, right? Back to kind of development and not for profit. But I started there, and my father again said to me, okay, you're working in this not for profit job. When are you going to start making money and go back to graduate school? And I said, I would have no idea what I would even go to graduate school for. So I took a marketing class, and that's when things started to click. And I said, oh, okay, I kind of like this. This seems interesting. Maybe I'll get my MBA. But simultaneously, I started to try and look for jobs in marketing. And I wasn't really very successful because people couldn't understand how the skills that I was learning in a fundraising perspective could be applicable to marketing, although they're directly applicable. And I'll explain some of that later. But I ended up getting a job at Chanel. And it wasn't in either the fashion business or the beauty business. It was actually Chanel's privately held, and it was in a part of their family office. The way that I got the job, and I really got a job as an assistant, is because I happened to speak French, which was another personal passion and something else that I learned from high school. But that was where it all started taking off for me, because I entered the world of beauty when I went to work at Chanel. Our offices were at 9 West 57th Street, which is where the beauty offices were. And so although I was on a different floor, I would see the people who worked in beauty, and I was mesmerized. And I said, I need to do that. But I also understood that a floor away at Chanel was also a world away, and that I was never going to be able to break into the business there. But what I did learn, and what I was able to learn, is I started to see all the trade publications, the women's wear dailies at the time, beauty, fashion. There were all of these different trades. Many of them don't even exist
Yep.
today. So I started to read them and understand the industry and understand who the people were in the industry. And actually, I just started writing letters to people. And I got a response one day from a company at the time called Cosmère. And Cosmère was the American subsidiary of L'Oreal Group before L'Oreal, essentially integrated Cosmère to become L'Oreal USA, part of the greater global company. And again, because I spoke French, somebody hired me to be their assistant. But this time, the person looked at my educational background, they looked at my work experience, and they said, you seem a little, I don't know, too educated to have this job. And I said, well, I actually am applying to go to business school, and I'd like to work in marketing. And so the person said, okay, do this for me for a year. I have two jobs right now. I'm running finance on one division, and I'm the acting general manager of another. And I need somebody who I can really trust as assisting me. But if you do this for me for a year, I will promote you into marketing. So I didn't have anything to lose because I didn't have anything.
Right.
So I took the job, and he was true to his word. And a year later, he promoted me into marketing. I had been accepted into business school, and I decided to go part-time at night. And that was kind of how it began.
It's funny because as you're telling the story, there are things generationally that hit home for me that seems like it's such a long time ago, but it's really not, where, you got a job because you wrote somebody a letter. That letter hit home, right? Like I've been working at PIMS for 35 years. And originally I wrote a letter and tucked in a resume into an envelope, sent it along, and hoped somebody would read it, hope somebody would call me, right? Now with the instant gratification of the way things are done, I think that's a little bit of a lost art. So it kind of hits home. It's nice to hear.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Mike, and when you say, like, I try and make myself available, etcetera, when people write to me on LinkedIn or, y I try and answer, it's kind of the same thing, but that happened to me multiple times in investigating what
Mhm.
kind of job I wanted, in getting my first job, in getting my second job, and, from that point on, you start to know people reach out to you, etcetera. But the beginning is hard
Yeah.
when you come from 0 to get into anything, and so that is something that I always remember, and I try and remember for others.
I looked at LinkedIn on the different opportunities you've had in your career, and you've got it's like a who's who of the beauty world, right? Everyone from Avon to Estee to Laura Geller and right down the line. Each company does it a little bit differently, right? And each company's expectations are a little bit different. And whether you're a huge multi-billion dollar conglomerate or a very small startup, everybody's hoping for the best, right? Everybody's hoping to get their product out there. Everybody's hoping to have their name top of mind of everybody. Along the way, I'm sure there was a lot of ups and downs. Along the way, I'm sure you tripped and fell many times, which taught you at the time it was probably the worst thing that ever happened to you. But along the way, it shows you, it teaches you these life lessons that makes you better for the next time. It makes you better to be able to mentor people. It makes you better when you end up in a leadership role to be able to say, like, been there, done that. Here's what you do. Here's how to feel. Here's how I felt. Makes you more human. Maybe you could share some of those experiences along the way as you sort of were climbing that corporate ladder of things that sort of didn't go your way.
We only have an hour. I probably need many weeks to go through all of those. But I think, and I tell my career story to people. Until now, it had 2 chapters, if you will, and I think now I'm starting a 3rd, but the 2 chapters were for 18 years, I worked in big companies, and then I made a transition and I started running smaller companies for private investors or private equity. But the 3 companies that I worked for originally were all culturally very, very different, and I learned very important things from each one of them. L'Oreal is its own MBA. I think it's the best at what it does in the best in class, highest level, always most advanced marketing. And you generally, not always, because I worked on some small brands there too, but you have the most resources, the biggest budgets, etc. And there's only one way, and that's the excellent way. And because I really started at the bottom and I was getting my MBA while I was working, and it was at a time at L'Oreal in the US when L'Oreal was hiring people with MBAs, I adopted a philosophy for myself, which was I may not be smarter than all of the people here, but I'm going to work harder. And that's how I'm gonna differentiate myself, 'cause I I didn't really think I could differentiate myself from an intelligence perspective. There were just too many smart people. And while I was at L'Oreal, it's a marketing culture, meaning that people who work and come out of marketing are the ones who become general managers. And so that's really what I learned there. I then went to Avon for 3 years, and I ultimately went back to L'Oreal for 4, but when I went to Avon, completely different culture. The culture is very sales driven. It was about one-to-one selling, etcetera, and I had to completely change my focus. In fact, marketing is the center of the universe at L'Oreal. Marketing was just a cog in the wheel at Avon, and learning that and learning how to adjust not to be in the center of things and how that made you behave in meetings, etcetera, could have been a real fall from grace for me. And I think I had my first, like, very humbling experience at Avon because it was the first time that I had a full 360 evaluation. 360 evaluation is where you get input and feedback from your bosses, from your colleagues, and from your subordinates. And so I remember that the coach was sitting with me one day and she said, you know, Alana, one of the pieces of feedback that I've been given is that when you walk into a room and you present, you address the most important person in the room and you focus all your attention on them. And it makes other people in the room feel unimportant. And I had this very gut reaction and I said, well, who the hell else am I supposed to be paying attention to? I'm like, my mother didn't raise no dummy. Like, what kind of feedback is that? And I had to really process it, and I understood that it was cultural. Because at L'Oreal, that's what you did. The way the room was set up, where you stood in the room, who you faced, who you spoke to, your team was behind you, the boss was in front of you. And that was both French and that was specific to L'Oreal culture. And when I went to Avon, I realized after that feedback, which was very humbling and humiliating, I said, oh, okay, this isn't all me. It's what I've learned based on one company's culture. And so I tell that story because I think in each company that I've worked at, to the point you made, that they were very different. And I did find my way to be successful, but I had to really understand culture. And what I saw happen to people over the years was I saw people fail not because they weren't good at their jobs or they didn't have skill, but because they didn't understand the cultural expectations in which they were supposed to be displaying their skill, and that's what made them go down. And so when I after Avon, I went back to L'Oreal for 4 years, and then I went to Estée Lauder. And when I came to Estée Lauder, I came in like with this like unspoken mark over my head was like, she's a L'Oreal girl. And that had a really negative connotation at the time. In fact, I was on a 6-month non-compete, and the first day I got to Lauder, my boss sat me down. I literally had not done anything yet. And she said, listen, Alana, there are a few things I want to make clear to you. You cannot speak to people that way. You're not going to be able to work them that way. And this is a different environment. And I was like, first of all, I just left. Maybe I left for a reason,
Right.
number one. Number two, like, I didn't do anything yet. And so what I did do was I went back to my office, and in very Estée Lauder fashion and culture, the day I started, there was a book on my desk, The Story of Mrs. Estée Lauder. It was in a bow. It had a note with a person who ran like executive development. It was her name, etc. And I went back to my office and I took out her note and I took out her business card and I called her and I said, hi, this is Elana Drell Szyfer, and I think I need a cultural guide. And basically, they assigned someone to me who it was my responsibility to obviously then follow up with them, but who was there to kind of teach me the culture of how to get things done. And I tell you that whole story to say that in the first part of my career, working in big companies, I took the best of the culture and the disciplines that each one of them had and brought it with me to small companies. But there were a lot of things that I needed to learn also about culture. Moving from big company to small company was one of the, on one hand, it would all sound obvious, career changing things, network changing things, I could have done for my career. But at the time, when I did it and I started to understand what it meant, it was also the most humbling and frightening things that I ever did. to the point where I actually kind of when I realized what I had done, and then I started in a new company and I kind of really understood the impact of not being at 767 Fifth Avenue on the 40th floor with the resources, with the view of Central Park, with the all the trappings. I literally had like a physical panic attack and like couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe. I needed like someone to like literally like talk me off the wall. But turned out to be a great thing. But yes, I've had many things like that happen to me.
I have 4 children. Yeah, 3 of them are out of college now, 1 is in college, and these as you're saying this, I'm like, these are the life lessons that I tell them. It's hard to get advice from your parents for sure, but when they come to me, it's all, focused on, what was college or is college and the expectations of getting through that. I'm like, this sort of thing continues forever, right? Like, as you go from your college life to your corporate life, whether it's small company, big company, whether you're working for the government, the state, or somebody personally, like the expectations are going to be different, right? And how you deal with it, how you handle it, how you handle yourself. Like, it says a lot about you that you were able to sort of look within yourself and say, I need sort of somebody that can sort of mentor me through this next stage, right? Like, the expectations are heavy. This is what they need from me. I can fake this till I make it, or I can do something about it, right? Your inner strength was able to pull you forward with that, to give you the opportunity to say, hey, listen, I'm really good at this. I'm not so good at this. I need somebody to work with, right? That's the kind of lesson that you try to give them as well as they work through this, because like we opened up saying, like these things you've done and these mistakes you've made and these, second guessing even that you've done yourself have made you what you are today.
I spoke at a conference last week with a number of founders and CEO operators, and I coach a lot of first-time CEOs. And I coach them because I made many, many mistakes, not only the first time I was a CEO, also the second and the third. But the first time, I think the classic mistakes are that you're the CEO, so you're supposed to know everything. And so, I try and help people understand A, you're not, and B, you shouldn't feel embarrassed about it and embarrassed about asking questions and embarrassed about asking for help. But that took me a long time to learn because you have this great feeling of insecurity around not knowing
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
That was one. The second is I've been stuck more than once. And I shared a story with this group about being stuck in a role and actually having somebody who not even really knowing I was stuck, but having somebody who was a coach of mine previously kind of say to me, Alana, I've never seen you like this. I think you're really stuck. And finding the right person who was somebody who I found incredibly frightening and intimidating and scary, so much so that I said, I think I'd like you to coach me because I knew that if I was comfortable with someone, it wasn't gonna work.
Right.
Like, I knew that I was in a place where I had to be like, somebody was gonna have to scare me straight, literally, right? Like, and that's ultimately what happened. So, I shared that, and I shared, times where, like, CEOs lie in bed at night with their eyes awake, looking at the ceiling, thinking about things. How there were problems that I had to think about solving where like, would have to be quiet with myself and just say, "Okay, if somebody asks me the question, am I doing everything in my being to solve this problem? Like, am I doing everything I can?" I know the answer is no. So what would I have to be doing differently? And, things like that, like stripping things way back to zero to kind of find the answers.
I wanted to ask you about once a marketer, always a marketer. So I wanted to kind of throw a couple of questions at you regarding, the beauty world and the space that we're in now. And you mentioned something on another podcast. You were talking about the power of imagery, right? And it got my brain thinking, like, in the 35 years since I've been doing this, PIMS, of course, being on the partnership end of things where we distribute and fulfill clients' white glove, consumer outreach, influencer marketing materials. It has changed so much in forget 35 years, in the last 5 years, right? The expectations of our clients, the companies in this space, of what it once was and what it now is, right? Like it's I could see it because I've lived it, the transformation from, back 25, 30 years ago, people would send product, they would send the same product to 200 people, they would send it out in mass, they would hope for the best, the message would be exactly the same across the entire space, and they would hope that they would get a lot of feedback, right? And I remember the first day somebody said, "We're gonna send this to influencers," and we were like, It's an influencer," right? Because we were sending it to, back then, newspapers and radio, magazines, TV, that was the thing to do. Those are the people that spoke about it. Now it has morphed into something so great that these white glove sendouts are so named because Ilana's package looks very different than Mike Ryan's package, which looks very different than Bob Smith's package. His and her expectations of what they're getting, the days of opening a package and the person next to you opening the same package are over, right? If you want to get this type of effort, you have to put forward that type of effort. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you've seen that change over time and where you think that's headed.
Yeah, I mean, you said it well. I mean, first of all, I kind of grew up in marketing, right, in the day and age of like the press event, and where that was an amazing thing to get to attend, to plan, to host, to all of those things. I was having a conversation with someone this week, but like, where's the press? They're on Substack, actually, right? Like, of what's of interest to me is like, who's on Substack and like, what are they writing, right? But then the question is, we used to we used to pay for subscriptions. Would you pay for a Substack? Who's paying for Substack subscriptions? So, I mean, you've said it. I mean, the world has completely changed. What hasn't changed and what I think has grown is people's interest in the category and the desire to participate. If anything, the creator economy and the creator communication universe makes beauty in a way much more democratic in that it's not a I tell you, right? I mean, brands used to control the message, as we all know. Brands don't control the message. The consumer controls the message. The brand puts a product out there, and then you see, right? It's all about the review of the product,
Right.
not the message, that you create. And, the whole activity system, listen, in a way, I don't know what we used to work so hard on because the choices were so limited, right? You did 2 photo shoots a year. Your contract was for 8. You got, global rights on 8 images. That was more than you were ever really using. I mean, everything, in a way, every single part of it has changed. In terms of where it's going, it's interesting because I was at a dinner last night. Obviously, the kind of topic of the moment is AI, all of its uses, et cetera. We were specifically talking about AI video and how real AI video looks, to the point where brands may not really even need to shoot anymore,
Hmm?
right? That you can just use AI video. And so, her prediction, and she actually is somebody who is a kind of trend predictor, is kind of like, it may get to the point where you just assume everything online is fake. And it actually brings you back to a full 360 of kind of only believing and trusting
Mhm.
human beings. I'm not sure in this case because things are just moving so fast. But to kind of go back to the beginning of your question, I was in the space when brands dictated the message and gave it to consumers. Obviously, I've seen the entire ecosystem change since then. I don't think we're going to come to a full 360 of what it used to be, but I do think there'll be some kind of leveling out. People cannot be sustained on things that ultimately are not real. And there's something else, which is I don't want to give up the belief that there is a possibility for loyalty and emotional attachment to products and brands. I don't want to give up on the idea that if you use something and you love something, you will only love it for a very short period of time until you find the next best thing. I do think there are things that have lasting value and sustaining value because they, in a very authentic way, connect with people on an emotional and sensorial level. Fragrance is a category, that comes to mind for that because there's so much linked between the experience of fragrance and memory, which gets into emotion. But I think that's the same with some functional products. I do think that as technology progresses and as people go through different life stages, their product loyalty may change because there are better things for a particular life stage that they're in. But I guess I'm sentimental enough to think that we will have some level of brand loyalty with something, that's not completely going away.
That authenticity also comes, like you said it really well too, that storytelling. Because I can think of, 4 or 5 brands that I associate with my mother, and 4 or 5 brands that I associate with my wife, and 4 or 5 brands that I associate with my daughter, and the reasons why they have, over the months or years, or in some cases decades, used those brands, stayed with that community, used their messaging because they believe in what they're being told. They've lived it. They've tried other products that are in that same space, and this is the one they go with. That type of community building, those trusted recommendations that tie into that, are all part of building that type of community that continues you on and on and on throughout these changes and ups and downs. I wanted to ask you, now that we're talking about community, I want to talk about CEW.
Yeah, perfect. I was thinking about that too. So perfect.
You guys do such a great job in that community build, right? So on our end, again, PIMS is a long time trusted, loved partner of the CEW and the folks there. And when we first got involved, decades ago, was just to sort of help with fulfillment. There was the expo was putting together these big bags, and they needed somebody to sort of fulfill the bags and get them to the expo, and that was kind of our thing. Then we started meeting the people in the CEW, who were in turn introducing us to people in the space, new brands, new people at brands, and we sort of stood back and went like, "Huh, this is the dream segue, right? This is exactly what we want to get in a partnership. We want to have a trusted partner that we value, that in turn values us as much as partners, right? So much so that they are introducing us to different companies and different people at companies. Over these 20 years, we come to learn that you're not just doing it for PIMS, who you trust, but you're doing it for all the people that are involved in the CEW. This is the growth of the CEW. This is what brings people in, is they're either folks that are, and this is coming from my perspective, folks that are brand new to this world, and they're looking to be introduced to the people in this space, or they've been around for 100 years and their roles are changing, and they want to sort of get an idea of who do I talk to get sort of feedback in this role. CEW does such a great job in doing that, that we've proudly partnered with them on everything from the expo to the awards to, we were talking a little bit about now our Midwest sort of push and trying to get new people. And with the ambassador program that CEW is doing, it has just been fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about your role there as the president. What's new, what's happening, what's exciting going on over at the CEW?
Sure. So it is the end of week 9 for me. I started on January 5th. Today's March 13th. However, I was a board member for 10 years and I had the opportunity to consult with CW over the summer and work with them on their strategy for this year. So I had a little bit of a head start. So there was a member study last year at CW where, one of the call outs was, Beauty is very national. It's not a New York-based thing only. So one of our initiatives, a 3-year goal, is really to make this a very vibrant community. And one of our initiatives for 2026 is regional relevancy. And so the idea behind the ambassador program was, let's have ambassadors wherever there's beauty. And so the ambassador program includes New York, but it's also San Francisco, LA, Dallas, Miami, and Chicago. And so essentially the way it works is we have somewhere between 4 to 8 ambassadors in each of those cities. They have a point person who is a board liaison who's on the CEW board. So they have a direct link back to CEW. And the person who runs membership in our team, our director of membership, is kind of their key CEW contact. And their goal is activate and do events locally, recruit new members, and then represent CEW. You know, if they're going somewhere where CEW is not, let them be an ambassador for CEW. And am surprised and was surprised by how much enthusiasm and passion all of the local ambassadors would have, but they do. And in the first 9 weeks of the year, we've had 6 connections events. Those are all including ambassadors. So that's been really terrific. Regional relevance and community is like very much at the heart and the center of what CW is focusing on this year. And, I think you mentioned new people to the industry. I think one of the very positive benefits of social media is a lot more people see see beauty, right? They see the brands, they see the founders, they hear these incredible founder stories. They want in, right? They want in, and young people, whether undergraduate or graduate level, are like, I want to work in beauty. And there seems to be this lack of information and like way to enter the industry. No lack of jobs. It's just like lack of entry points. How do you get in? And so I think that's a responsibility of CEW, is to help people figure out how you enter the industry and educate them. So we now have free memberships for students, any student, undergraduate or graduate level, as a way for them to learn about the industry and as a way for us to be the access point into the industry.
Coming out of COVID, it was always a fear of mine too, because my title is Chief Networking Officer, so I tend to do some networking. And my fear was, will everybody go back to meeting face to face? Will everybody go back to being able to engaging that community? You know as well as I do, and everybody listening as well, there's nothing better than sort of face to face contact, right? Of course, there's time for do things online, and it's very convenient. And when people aren't able to do things, that's a great way to sort of segue into it. But nothing beats being able to sort of see your friends in the industry that you haven't seen in weeks or months, or talk about those new things that are upcoming. And CEW does such an excellent job of giving those opportunities. Again, whether it's mentoring a student that's just coming in, or having somebody that's been in the industry 35 years come in, listen to really great programming, panel discussions that are through the roof with great content, but also, having that time to network with one another. The Beauty Expo is a great example of that, right? Where else can you bring in 1,000 people that are all interested in hearing what the new thing's going to be, or finding out what their brand is coming out with, all at the same time as you walk the aisles or walk the space? You can't walk 2 feet without being like, "Hey, hello. Oh my God, I can't believe it's great to see you." That kind of excitement is really a game changer, at least in our industry, right? Where people sort of need to sort of be able to reconnect with folks, and whether it's, looking for a new job or doing the job you're at better. To us, the CW really has hands down sort of led the path in that.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I think CW is incredibly well known for its, huge tentpole events. Achiever Awards, the Beauty Expo, etc. And now people are asking us for something else that we're trying to do in addition, and that's smaller, more intimate events. So things like smaller dinners where there's potentially the opportunity for discussion around a particular subject, or thought leadership where we bring in a speaker so that people have a little bit of both. They have like the big stadium style meet and greet and air kiss, air hug, etcetera, and then the opportunity to kind of sit with people in a more intimate environment and have some deeper conversations and also learn things. And so we're trying to balance those two things as well.
As we close down here, I always like to ask people what the next big thing is, right? But in your case, it's a little bit different because I want to ask you specifically when it ties into the CEW. I'm sure there's a lot of fantastic things planned. Anything little nugget you can leave us with of something maybe you have planned?
Yes, absolutely. I think the one thing we didn't talk about, I hope, in our conversation, going back to how did it start and what have you learned, is I'm personally passionate about professional development and lifelong learning. And I had many experiences when I was a CEW member of being a mentored and being a mentor. And so professional development is something that members are asking us for, but also companies are asking us for. And so we've started a few things, but we have a long way to go. But building professional development. So we kicked off a career column. It actually today's Friday, so it's running for its second time today, but we have a career advice column now that's being written by a career coach, but she comes out of beauty, so I think she comes at it with an interesting industry specific lens. We're starting an online mentoring program, group mentoring, one to many. But we're also starting to work with companies one-on-one on helping them solve their professional development questions, offering more webinars around specific topics within professional development. And something we're working on that we haven't announced yet because it's not finalized, but even sort of like university partnerships where there might be on-site professional development trips or treks or intensives, 3 days, things like that, at all levels, right? Sort of early stage, mid, and then what I call upskilling, learning new skills as the industry continues to evolve. So that will take us more than 9 weeks, but that for me is kind of what's next is how do we make CW the place that people think about not only to meet people but to continue to develop yourself so you show up as a better you for your company.
Wonderful. The younger letter writing you would be very proud as to the path you've taken and where you've ended up. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and joining us on Minutes with Mike. Really excited for what's next.
Thank you, Mike. I had fun and thanks for asking.